Bring you breaking news. As you can see on your screen there, heavy rainfall and of course persisting for the next few days over the eastern parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga due to the tropical weather system. And with this severe weather warning, as I look at a statement that just has been released around the Kruger National Park, day visitors into that park are not allowed there, as the park has temporarily suspended operations as a result of the severe weather warning, the persistent and heavy rainfall affecting Limpopo and Mpumalanga. The park now taking a precautionary decision not to allow day visitors into the Kruger National Park. Of course, that's up until conditions improve. You'll recall that earlier this week, the park was faced with a challenging situation in which several day visitors were unable to exit the park after a bridge at Crocodile Bridge Gate was covered by water because of the rising river levels. While all affected visitors were safely managed, this incident is highlighting the risks posed by the ongoing weather conditions. So SANParks are saying that they're mindful of the current strain on the operational and emergency responses on resources during this period of persistent rainfall. As such, the organization is saying that they'd rather prefer to focus available resources on real emergencies and ensuring the safety of guests, staff and surrounding communities, rather than avoidant incidents linked to non-essential travel within the park. So this decision is really to restrict day visitor access. They're saying that it's a preventative measure, a safety measure, which will be reviewed continuously as the weather and road conditions changes. And SANParks, of course, now apologizing for the inconvenience which may be caused by the persistent rainfall and appreciating the understanding and cooperation. You'll recall that we have been keeping a very close eye on the weather developments in Mpumalanga. Yesterday, the South African Weather Service had issued an orange level 6 warning for severe thunderstorms. And of course, now issuing this heavy rainfall persisting for the next 2 days over the eastern parts of Limpopo and Mpumalanga because of the tropical weather system. So the weather models indicate about 100 to 200 millimeters of accumulated rainfall. That's over the next 2 days in regions that are already saturated with overflowing rivers and dams. As a result, the expected rainfall will lead to a high likelihood of severe flooding-related impacts. We have our reporter on the ground, Giyani, who's been monitoring developments there and, of course, assessing the impact of these relentless rains in the area and, of course, affecting learners who are eagerly awaiting to head to school on day 1 of the 2026 academic year. Of course, that has not happened. And 2 helicopters have since been dispatched to airlift flood victims at Mbaula village outside Giyani in Limpopo. Mopani District Municipality spokesperson Odas Ngobeni says that a 3rd helicopter from Pretoria has now been commissioned. Ngobeni says the village is flooded and access has been cut off. He says the victims will be taken to the Giyani Stadium for temporary shelter. So the heavy rains have caused extensive damage, as you can imagine, to infrastructure across the district. It's forced the closure of several major roads. The damage initially disrupted traffic, but the situation has since worsened, with reports of homes being damaged and some at risk of collapse. So the disaster management teams have been identified. Additional evacuation sites have also been identified. And there's also a warning that water supply systems have been compromised, which means that water flow to some communities may be reduced or even irregular. So that is our breaking news, a red level 10 warning for disruptive rains in the Limpopo and Mpumalanga area. Let's take you live now to SABC News reporter Giyani, who is monitoring the impact of these heavy rains. Giyani, a very good afternoon to you. And you have been moving across the province, just really getting a sense of the impact. What are your findings as this warning has been issued, warning that it also could result in a loss of life?
Certainly, and that is breaking news there that you are mentioning, the level 10 red warning from the South African Weather Service. We've also just received information from the spokesperson of the Mopani District, Mr. Odas Ngobeni, talking to us about a 4-year-old who has died. We are not necessarily certain and sure around the circumstances about the death of the 4-year-old from Mbaula village, which we know at this particular stage that it remains inaccessible. We are working around the clock to get that information so that we can update regarding the state of disaster that has fallen across large parts of the northeastern part of the Limpopo province, where we currently are right now in the Giyani CBD. The rainfall has temporarily stopped. However, indications and signs of heavy precipitations are still there. You can clearly tell that it will rain again. The parts that you see behind me in the CBD that are flooded, this has been since around the Giyani township, including a local mall, a local shopping complex, where we saw large amounts of water really covering that area and leaving some businesses unable to operate. So these are the scenes that we are largely seeing around Giyani. Earlier on, we're reporting from the Bolobedu area, where we saw villages that have not had access to other parts of the Bolobedu area, and this is largely due to bridges and infrastructure that were washed away at the Molototsi River. So we are certainly going to be monitoring the scene here in Giyani. Earlier on, we are monitoring at Bolobedu, and we will try to see and figure out a plan on how to provide coverage for Mbaula, which is one of the most hardest hit areas currently. And at this particular stage, we are warned that it is inaccessible, and it is not the only location that is inaccessible by road. We will then bring more coverage and more information to update our viewers. Back to you.
Assess the impact on the ground. Of course, this is a developing story with the heavy rains. What is the impact that you're seeing? Because for one, weather officials are always emphasizing the importance of heeding the warning because of the impact of the warnings, which may result in a loss of life. I mean, you've mentioned the impact on infrastructure damage. Talk to us a little bit more about what you're seeing and how this is affecting community members.
Certainly, officials are on the ground. We know that the MEC for the Kokta department, Mr. Basikopo Magamu, is on the ground currently in Giyani. We are going to speak to him shortly, whereby they are still compiling and, of course, conducting their assessments to observe the negative impact, the overall negative impact of this particular situation of the disruptive heavy rainfall. We have seen several bridges in the area that we reported from in Bolobedu outside Giyani that had completely been washed off as a result of flooding and an overflow from local river streams. And we've also seen some clinics that have been closed as a result, and community members are not able to access those particular clinics. Earlier on, the municipality in the Mopani District mentioning that because of corrosive forces as well as erosion, soil erosion there, some of the water in the dams that are supposed to provide water to communities have become contaminated as a result of mud, and they're unable to right now extract water safely to ensure that it's clean, drinkable water for communities. Some communities are cut off. Earlier on, we're at Mamataka as well as Moledzoni village, where we saw communities not being able to move because of the heavy rainfall. As I mentioned, in the Giyani area, the rain has stopped temporarily. However, signs, I see the clouds above, that there are signs certainly that heavy precipitation will still remain the order of the day. Back to you.
As you crisscross the provinces, just really getting an idea of the impact on the ground of these heavy rains, you did mention a short while ago that a 4-year-old is believed to have died. As you try and confirm the details around the circumstances resulting in that death. Of course, we know that as officials monitor the developments and the impact, it will be imperative for residents and communities to avoid low-lying bridges, and of course talking a little bit more about how this is affecting day-to-day mobility. Yesterday you spoke to learners who were eagerly anticipating to start the 2026 academic year, but they were unable to do that because of the impact of these heavy rains. Have officials, education officials commented, and what are schools in the area? How are they managing the impact of these floods?
So when the information regarding the suspension of lessons, of the resumption of lessons when schools reopened was initially released, it was the day before, right? So right now you had schools still grappling to distribute that information to their school population and learners in particular. When we went to the Giyani High School, the kids there at the Giyani High School were unable to really tell that, you know, some of them had arrived at their school hoping that they would get to confirm whether indeed or not their schools were instructed to reopen on Monday. So, but right now, today, we've not seen any learners. There has not been any confusion. The statement from the Department of Education remains that for now, schools will be suspended, education will be suspended. However, the learners that we spoke to in areas like Tomo here in Giyani expressed sadness, you know, largely saying that they were expecting to kickstart the 2026 on a high note regarding their academics. Some of them are grade 12 learners, and they're still not at school at this particular moment. However, we're going to be in this area for some time. We will have an opportunity again to speak to learners and observe the situation on Monday, as the South African Weather Service says that these rainy conditions are expected to subside on Saturday.
And of course, as you make mention, Katleho, of the impact on infrastructure, I would imagine that that essentially means that some people will be affected and their homes could even dismantle. What does it mean for those who could find themselves homeless? Have community centers been made available? What are officials saying about where some people will be housed should they find themselves in a situation where their home has tumbled?
Certainly a very important question, one that we're hoping to pose to the MEC for Kokta, Mr. Basikopo Makamu. However, the district municipality that has been part of some of the emergency meetings that have been taking place since the start of this heavy torrential rains indicated that they have started with evacuation plans. They've received a few reports of houses and homes that have collapsed as a result of overly saturated moist soil. So the homes eventually caved under those wet soil conditions. So they say those people have been evacuated, also mentioning that there is the availability of the local community hall where those that are in need of temporary shelter, that are in need of relief, can approach the local community hall. However, they are saying that because these meetings are still taking place, there's emergency meetings with all the relevant stakeholders and community leaders, they will then be able to determine a course of action. So at the moment, as things stand, those that have been evacuated, according to the municipality, it's not a large number, as there's not been a lot of damage to homes. However, they are monitoring. They have their disaster center workers out there monitoring the situation, as well as other rescue workers currently monitoring the situation.
Nyoni, SABC News reporter on the ground there as we continue to assess the impact of a developing story. A red level 10 warning being issued for disruptive rain in affecting parts of Mpumalanga and Limpopo. And of course, this is a warning issued by the South African Weather Service, not to be taken lightly, as you can see that Katleho Nyoni spoke about the widespread flooding. And behind him there, the impact was seen. Damage to roads, bridges and settlements, a story that we will continue to keep an eye on as we assess the impact. There is a danger to lives due to the fast-flowing streams that you can see on your screen there. Officials at pains to warn residents and communities alike to ensure that they do not pass through those waters and not, of course, take it for granted. We do know that the Kruger National Park has also since issued a warning. The visuals that you're watching there on screen, they are saying that the persistent and heavy rainfall affecting the Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces. As a result of this, the Kruger National Park has taken a precautionary decision to not allow day visitors into the park until the conditions improve. You can see the impact there on your screen, a bird's eye view of just how dangerous the conditions are. So a warning there being given by officials of sand parks over the Kruger National Park.